CBS Radio Mystery Theater presents... Come in. Welcome. I'm E.G. Marshall. Talking about marriage, Miguel Cervantes defines it as a noose. The Greek philosopher Menander calls it an evil. Shakespeare also takes a swipe at it and says that a young man married is a young man marred. Finally, there's Pombulo, who notes that marriage and murder both begin with M. By now, you should have a pretty good idea of what our story is going to encompass.
Mrs. Pilbeam, you have survived 6 husbands.
6? That is correct, Mr. Poindexter.
All of them died less than 2 years after their marriage to you. Is that not true, Mrs. Pilbeam?
Yes, that is true.
Each of them was insured. Is that not a fact?
That is a fact.
Tell me, how do you account for it, Mrs. Pilbeam?
Coincidence, Mr. Poindexter. Coincidence.
Our mystery drama, Lady Bluebeard, was written especially for the Mystery Theater by Sam Dan and stars Fred Gwynne. It is sponsored in part by Buick Motor Division and Contact, the 12-hour cold capsule. I'll be back shortly with Act 1. According to Charles Dickens, Bluebeard may have been a victim of excessive connubiality, which would mean, I suppose, that it was married life that drove him to do it. Ah, yes, married life, wedded bliss. However, putting aside the poets and romantics for the moment, marriage is whatever you make of it. It is an edifice constructed by a man and a woman, and there are those who erect a magnificent cathedral, others who slap together a ramshackle shanty. We're back at the turn of the century.
You wish to see me, Poindexter?
Yes, Mr. Hotchkiss.
Well, have a chair.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Now then.
In reference to this claim, sir.
Which claim, Poindexter? The company has over 50,000 policyholders. Be definite.
Yes, sir.
And brisk. I should think your recent term of service with Colonel Roosevelt's cavalry regiment would have taught you to be brisk.
Yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir.
He's a brisk man, that Theodore Roosevelt?
Indeed he is, sir.
Well, then emulate him. Plunge in. Forge ahead. State the issue with no further ado. Present the facts.
Well, sir, there may not be any facts.
No facts?
No facts as such. I am merely voicing suspicions.
Suspicions?
Oh, I see now. I am mistaken. Therefore, I shall waste no more of your time, sir.
No. Suspicions are the lifeblood, more, the beating heart, as it were, of the insurance business. Why, sometimes one healthy, robust suspicion is worth more than 100 weak and anemic facts. Dive in, my boy. What have you got there?
The company holds a policy, sir, on the life of one Ebenezer Pilbeam.
Continue.
In the amount of $2,000.
A modest sum.
Payable on his death to his beneficiary, his wife, one Luana Pilbeam.
And the aforementioned Mr. Pilbeam has just departed this vale of tears.
He has indeed, sir.
And the bereaved spouse, the aforementioned Mrs. Luana Pilbeam, has just submitted a claim for payment.
Yes, sir.
Well, then I suppose we shall have to pay it. Unless there's some way we can do her out of it, legally, of course.
Oh, you don't mean that seriously, Mr. Hotchkiss. You're joking, sir.
The policy is in order, I take it.
Oh, yes, sir.
Then, with a smiling face but a breaking heart, I must authorize the payment. Prepare the check for my signature.
Yes, sir.
Unless, of course, there may be something to your suspicions.
Well, sir, Mr. Pilbeam was 70.
Yes, he left us in the fullness of his years, the biblical 70.
Whereas Mrs. Pilbeam is 35.
Uh-huh.
They had only been married for 2 years, sir.
Continue.
Therefore, at the time of the wedding, she was 35. He was 67. Now, sir, why would a woman wish to marry a man more than twice her age?
Why? Well, there are two reasons. First, because she may have been attracted by his maturity, his wisdom, his kindness. Second, she may have been attracted by his fortune. And if he were a weak and sickly 67, she would not have to wait long.
Yes, sir. However, sir, Mr. Pilbeam had neither education nor fortune. He was employed as a streetcar conductor.
Cause of death?
Heart attack.
And this, of course, kindles your suspicions.
Yes, sir. There is no history of any heart ailment. He was known to have been in good physical condition, sir, even for a man of his years. Indeed, you might say he was notorious for his good health.
What you're saying, then, is that he did not die of a heart attack.
That is what I am suspecting, sir.
And how do you suspect Mr. Pilbeam met with his untimely end?
Poison.
Administered by whom?
His wife.
Mrs. Luana Pilbeam.
Yes, sir.
For $2,000.
Right, sir.
Isn't that a rather modest sum?
If I may refresh your memory, sir, this is the second time you used the word modest to describe the sum of $2,000.
Oh, so I have. Would a woman murder her husband for $2,000?
She might, sir. And precisely because it is a modest sum, one that would not draw attention, cause comment, create suspicion. Furthermore, it also gives her an income of $1,000 a year.
For 2 years?
Sir, 2 years ago, a Mrs. Louisa Plowright cashed a policy for $2,000 on the life of her husband, Harold. Mrs. Plowright was 33 years old. 4 years ago, a Mrs. Laverne Preston was paid $2,000 on the death of her husband, Percy. Mrs. Preston was 31, sir.
Are you saying that Luana Pilbeam, Louisa Plowright, and Laverne Preston may be one and the same person?
And 2 years before that, sir, a Mrs. Lillian Pumice collected $2,000 on the death of her husband, Leander. Mrs. Pumice was 29 years old, sir.
And I am to assume that all the husbands were elderly gentlemen?
Yes, sir.
And all passed away from heart attacks?
So the physicians stated, sir.
How do you account for the fact that she seems to marry men whose names begin with P?
Well, sir, it would seem then to be unnecessary for her to change the monogram on her linens and silver.
Oh, yeah. Well, Poindexter, what is your recommendation?
I suggest, sir, that we investigate the matter thoroughly before we pay Mrs. Pilbeam a penny. My name is Raymond Netherby Poindexter. When people discover that I'm an investigator for an insurance company, they always say, well, you certainly don't look like an insurance investigator. And when they find out I was a member of the Colonel Theodore Roosevelt's Rough Riders, they exclaim, well, you certainly don't look like a Rough Rider. Well, you see, the truth is, I really don't look like anyone, which is what an investigator should look like, if you know what I mean. Anyhow, the first thing I did was to call upon Dr. Morley Braithwaite.
Miss Poindexter, you certainly don't look like an insurance investigator.
Dr. Braithwaite, you signed a death certificate for a Mr. Ebenezer Pilbeam.
Yes, I did.
May I ask, Doctor, why did you sign it?
Well, I signed it because he was dead.
Yes. What I meant was...
Now, please, be specific, my good man.
Yes, sir.
The specificity. The cornerstone and the linchpin, as it were, of all science.
I agree, Doctor.
Then what is your specific question?
Why was he dead?
Because his heart had stopped beating.
Yes, sir. I believe that occurs in all cases of death. What I mean was, why did his heart stop beating?
If we only know.
But on the certificate, Doctor, you wrote heart attack.
No, not quite. Specifically, I wrote cardiac failure.
Doesn't that imply heart attack?
Well, if you choose to make that inference.
Why, Doctor, was the cardiac failure?
I've already answered that question. More specifically, I told you why I cannot answer that question. And I don't know.
Doctor, do you mean Mr. Pilbeam died just like that?
Well, I'm afraid so.
But, Doctor, is there a possibility that Mr. Pilbeam might have been poisoned?
Yes.
Well, Doctor, your report makes no mention of that fact.
Well, you asked me if there was a possibility. The answer to that question must always be yes. Anything is possible. However, I could find no evidence.
I see. Would you state categorically, Doctor, that Mr. Pilbeam was not killed by a poison?
I would only state categorically that Mr. Pilbeam died because his heart stopped beating.
And you do not suspect foul play?
I could suspect foul play, but I couldn't prove it. But I would never rule it out.
Yes. I see. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Braithwaite.
That's inner help.
Actually, he was of no help at all. That is, to my insurance company. And so I decided to visit the recently bereaved widow, Mrs. Luana Pilbeam, herself. Perhaps I couldn't prove that she had actually poisoned her husband or murdered him in some other mysterious manner, but I might know enough to frighten her out of her demanding payment. I was not prepared for the Mrs. Luana Pilbeam who opened the door to me. She had soft, flowing black hair, radiant, creamy skin, and the largest, warmest brown eyes. I introduced myself, and she said,
"Oh, Mr. Raymond Netherby Poindexter, you certainly don't look like an insurance investigator."
May I come in?
Certainly. Please, be seated.
Thank you.
Such a hot day. May I pour you a glass of lemonade?
Lemonade? No, thank you.
Uh-huh. Well, I suppose you're here about poor Ebenezer?
Yes. Mr. Pilbeam was somewhat older than you, I take it.
33 years, to be exact.
It would seem to be a rather wide gulf.
Oh, but love spans it so easily.
May I ask how
I fell in love with Mr. Pilbeam? Well, he drove the horse car that I would board each morning. He was such a handsome gentleman.
I dare say.
And he cracked his whip and twirled his mustache with such panache that I lost my heart completely.
He died quite unexpectedly.
Oh, no one ever dies unexpectedly, Mr. Poindexter. Is it not written, in the midst of life, we are in death?
Yes. Had Mr. Pilbeam been ill?
Oh, no. He was a picture of glowing health. He had an outdoor job, you know.
Mm-hmm. How did it happen?
One evening, we went to bed, as usual. The following morning, I woke up. He didn't.
Mrs. Pilbeam, the insurance company has received your request for payment.
Oh, yes. I really didn't. Still don't feel entirely comfortable about it.
May I ask why?
Well, it seems so crass. A man dies. His widow is given a sum of money, as if that somehow balances the books and settles the account.
Oh, it's the way of the world.
And yet, what is a poor woman to do? It is Ebenezer's gift to me, from the grave. His way of saying, carry on, my darling. Live.
I see. You have, therefore, presented the insurance company with a claim for $2,000.
Yes, I have.
And no doubt you are under the impression that I have arrived here for the purpose of presenting you with the check?
I would assume this would be the object of your visit.
The object of my visit is to offer you a bargain.
A bargain, Mr. Poindexter?
Withdraw your claim.
Yes?
And in return, I can promise that you shall not be sent to prison.
Now, what kind of offer is that? Is it one that she cannot refuse? Suddenly, we're playing showdown. We know, or we think we know, the high cards he happens to be holding. What aces does she have in her hand or up her sleeve? Wait just a few minutes, and then we shall deal you the second act. As Mr. Carlyle put it, no man lives without jostling and being jostled. In all ways, he has to elbow himself through the world, giving and receiving offense. Certainly our Mr. Raymond Netherby Poindexter has chosen a profession where he gives offense and jostles people. Now, are we about to see how he himself reacts to being on the receiving end?
Permit me, Mr. Poindexter, to restate your proposition. If I withdraw my claim to my husband's insurance money, you will promise that I shall not be sent to prison.
Yes, Mrs. Pilbeam.
And why should I be sent to prison?
Fraud.
Ah.
May I have your answer? Or do you require a short interval of time to consider?
So, your name is Raymond Netherby Poindexter. A trace of Scottish ancestry there. Am I correct?
Mrs. Pilbeam, the subject of this discussion is not whether...
Netherby, a famous Highland name?
I would assume so.
Probably on your mother's side. Am I correct?
Yes, her name was Netherby. Now, see here...
You recall Sir Walter Scott's poem, Lochinvar?
Mrs. Pilbeam...
Oh, young Lochinvar has come out of the west. The next line?
Throughout the wide border, his steed is the best.
See, you do know it.
Yes, my mother used to recite it all the time.
Because she was a Netherby. Oh, the poor Netherbys. They were on the losing side, remember?
Well,
Bold Lochinvar was in love with fair Ellen Netherby. But, fearing him dead, she had decided to marry someone else. How did Scott put it?
For a laggard in love and a dastard in war had won the fair Ellen of bold Lochinvar.
Right! He came to Netherby Hall too late to stop the wedding, and so he stayed to have one dance with the bride. And whispered one word into her ear, and he swept her up onto his horse, and they were away.
Yes, and now, Mrs. Pilbeam, please, to the matter at hand.
For just a moment, the Netherbys were taken by surprise, but then the angry pursuit began. And oh, how Scott describes it. There was mounting amongst grains of the Netherby clan. Fosters, Fenwicks, and Musgraves, they rode and they ran. Help me with the next line, Mr. Poindexter.
There was racing and chasing on Canopy Lee.
But the lost bride of Netherby, they did never more see. Oh, such exciting poetry.
Yes. And now...
And now for a confession. We are distantly related. Your mother, you say, was a Netherby?
Yes, but...
My mother was a Fenwick. Do you know what else? My father was a Foster. I have cousins who are Musgraves. Oh, we are dyed-in-the-wool clan Netherbys. Oh, we must have a toast. You do not take spirituous beverages. I understand. I approve. Lemonade.
If it's all the same to you, I'd really rather...
But it isn't all the same to me. We must pledge a toast to our newly discovered relationship. The Netherbys. You don't like the lemonade?
No, I do. It just seems a bit tart.
Oh, well, you see, I put something in there.
You put something in there?
Mm-hmm. A tiny little secret ingredient of my very, very own.
Really? What?
Oh, no, it's no use your asking. I'll never tell.
Mrs. Pilbeam, I shall not be distracted. I know your secret.
My secret?
You have married a series of men, and then you have proceeded to murder each of them for the insurance money.
Murder? Oh, dear me.
You deny it? Were you not also married to a Mr. Harold Plowright, to a Mr. Percy Preston, and to a Mr. Leander Pumice?
Of course.
Huh? You admit it?
Well, you left out Mr. Beauregard Parrish and also Mr. Hubert Pollard.
You admit that there were others?
Were there? Let me think for a moment. No, Beauregard and Hubert complete the list.
Isn't it coincidental that each of the men you marry takes out an insurance policy and names you the beneficiary?
Most married men who can afford it buy insurance for their wives.
Yes, but most of them don't die.
Oh, I must correct you.